This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have an outstanding guest from Stealing Signals. It's the one and only Ben Gretch. Welcome to the show, my man.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, it's going good. It's fine, but this was supposed to be a celebration show, right? We're supposed to come on here. Mariners going to the ALCS. Everything's good. You know, get that 3-0 lead yesterday. I thought we were great. How are you holding up?
Yeah, I'm a wreck. I went to games 1 and 2. I have tickets for game 5 tomorrow. Been a Mariners fan my whole life. For people who don't know the whole story with the Mariners, they haven't been to the postseason. They've been once since 2001, which is the year they won 116 games, tied the record for most in the regular season, and then didn't even make the World Series. They lost the best regular season ever, and then lost in the ALCS in 5 games, 4-1. We have not had a great postseason record. You know, the 90s teams that I grew up on, Ken Griffey Jr. and those guys, deserved at least a World Series trip, if not a championship at some point. Never got it. Lost in the ALCS 3 times in 7 years in that span, and then didn't go back. After winning 116 games, didn't even make the playoffs again the next year or the next couple of years. Didn't go back for 20-something years. In 2022, we didn't make it in 23 or 24. In 2022, we went as a wild card team, won the wild card round series, and then lost in the divisional round 3-0 to the Astros. Didn't even win a game in the divisional series. This year, we win the division for the first time since that 2001 team. We're in the divisional series. We get the home field advantage. We lose game 1, then we won both games 2 and 3, had a chance to close it out, as you mentioned, didn't get it done. And so now, there's the whole history of the Seattle Mariners in a nutshell. That's how nervous I am. I can't stop thinking about it.
I love it. That sums it up pretty perfectly. I think for people out there that, are looking for a team to support, I mean, Seattle, we need you. We need you here in Seattle because we are due when it comes to franchises across all sports. I think the Seattle Mariners is a team that people can get behind if you like the underdog, for sure. We're going to get into a little bit more about your background with sports and just fandom and everything and how it kind of ties into what you're doing. But for those unfamiliar with your Substack, Stealing Signals, can you share what that is all about?
Yeah. I worked at CBS in 2019 and 2020. And when the pandemic hit, I was in like an entry-level role there. And after a year, we were going to have negotiations on, a longer-term contract and those things. And my 1 year was up in May of 2020. So the pandemic hits that spring. The college basketball tournament gets canceled, and CBS, from a broader business perspective, is hurt by not having live sports. That's one of their big things every year, obviously. I was in a position where, the types of negotiations that I was hoping to have weren't going to happen. It was basically what I was told, and it was going to be tough for somebody in a position like me to get, as much as I had gotten really good feedback and was told that I was looking great throughout to be there long term. It didn't really materialize. So I ended up leaving there voluntarily. I mean, they wanted to keep me at the same sort of entry level role, but I ended up leaving and was like, all right, well, I did the fantasy thing for a few years and I'm sort of ready to move on and get like a normal job and do all of these things. Or I actually was working a second normal job at the time, but kind of focus more on a different career and make a plan. And I left CBS, and then I had some people reach out to me and say, hey, this article you write, Stealing Signals, really enjoy reading it. It would be interesting if you, kept it going in some other capacity. And a couple people specifically mentioned Substack. I always shout out Sal Stefanilli, who's an awesome guy in the fantasy space, who was one of the people that I do remember that was saying, the Substack thing is getting a little bigger. These newsletters are getting bigger. It might be a good landscape for you. So literally, the Saturday before week 1 that year in 2020, I fired up a Substack, started it up. The Monday, my Stealing Signals article is a weekly recap I write on Mondays and Tuesdays. And so that Monday, 2 days later, I wasn't even able to accept paid subscriptions yet because there was a little snafu with the subject matter that I chose when I was signing up on Substack. I chose fantasy sports like / gambling, and they were like, oh, well, if it's gambling, you're not allowed to get money. I'm like, wait, no. It's just like it's an advice thing. I'm not doing any kind of gambling stuff here. There's no legality issues. So I had to deal with all this, red tape, and I wasn't even able to take subscriptions the first week that I started writing it. But it was really just an outlet. People reached out to me and wanted the product, and it was cool how big it took off. And it's my main squeeze now in the fantasy space is just to write this newsletter. And the cool thing about it, and the advice or the feedback that I get is that I'm able to write about what I think is important, and I'm not really beholden to some of the content requirements and those things, and that other people are, and that I was at other places. So people that read me at CBS and in earlier places, they thought, consistently got this feedback that they thought that my writing was a little bit more freed up and a little bit more, loose. And I consistently heard that, at the newsletter, it was like the best fit for my content. And that's a cool thing to hear. It's a cool thing to hear that you're kind of, actualizing your potential, and the people that have followed you and have enjoyed your content believe that this is a good fit. And so that's what I've been doing now for 5 years, since 2020. I've been able to grow it and continue to expand it. And got a lot of great support early on, and it really had a strong following early. And then, it's continued to just sort of grow year over year. And it's a blast to do. I feel so privileged to be my own boss and kind of do it my own way.
That's awesome. No, obviously you put everything you got into it. That's for sure. If anybody's ever read it, that is very clear. Now that it has to come from a background in sports, an appreciation for sports, usually coming from a childhood love of sports. When did it all begin for you? When did that passion for sports really come about?
Yeah, but I mean, before I had memories, when my parents moved out of my childhood home a few years ago, they found one of my first written papers from first grade, which in the corner said, Ben Gretch, age 6. And it was a game recap of the Vikings beating the Oilers in the Super Bowl. The walk-off final play was a safety. It was a one point win. No idea why Houston was passing that situation. Absolutely absurd imagination on that kid.
That's amazing. So teams, players, like who were, I mean, you mentioned, some of your Mariners, players, like
Yep.
where did the passion for each sport and each player come from?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Seattle, and I was a big Seattle sports fan, but I never really took to the Seahawks. They weren't great in those early 90s years. I was born in 87, and my grandfather was a farmer in Montana, a Minnesota sports fan, Twins, Vikings. I didn't root for the Twins. So we had Ken Griffey Jr. and all these guys. I was immediately a huge Mariners fan, but he got me on the Vikings at a young age. Chris Carter was my guy, Jake Reed. Later, Randy Moss came along, but Warren Moon was their quarterback in the mid-90s for a few years and had a couple great years with them. I had a Warren Moon jersey when I was 8 years old or something. He had played at the University of Washington as well. So I watched the Huskies football. They were really fun in the 90s. They won national championship in 91. My dad got season tickets starting, I think, in 97 or 98. I was about 10 or 11 years old, started to get to go to Husky football games, and it was rowdy in the 90s and to go to Husky football games. So Husky football games, and they had Brock Heward and Jerome Pathon and all these guys. I got a chance to meet Brock Heward on campus one time on a school field trip or something, and shake his hand while he was in college. It was very cool for a young kid and who even as an elementary school kid knew who this was. I was always really plugged into that stuff at a young age. You had the 90s Mariners were incredible. Griffey and Edgar and Jay Buhner and Randy Johnson, all these guys. You had the 90s Sonics were incredible. Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. My favorite guy from those teams was Big Smooth Sam Perkins. So those were and then the 90s Huskies basketball team. They won in 1998. They went to the NCAA tournament. They lost against UConn. Almost had the upset against UConn. Richard Hamilton hits a jumper that's always on those clips of the biggest buzzer beaters, the big moments of March Madness. So, and the Seattle sports guy, all those teams. But instead of the Seahawks, I was always a Vikings fan, which really maximizes, everyone in Seattle talks about how none of our teams have ever quite gotten there, except the Seahawks did finally win a Super Bowl, but that wasn't a team I rooted for. Instead, I root for the Vikings, who are notoriously one of the most troubled fan bases. No team that I've ever passionately rooted for has won a championship. I don't know what that's like.
Well, I think the Vikings, there's a lot of correlations with, like, say, our Mariners, right? So that's a team I think people could get behind. I grew up, like, my dad was from Minnesota, so, I was always a Seahawks fan, but I appreciated the Vikings. And you mentioned Brock Huard. I remember watching him play like high school basketball, out of Puyallup, right? So I love you. We could probably talk hours about this kind of stuff for sure. When it comes to just your favorite moment all time in sports as a fan, what would you say is the biggest one for you?
There's a lot more of the worst moments than the
we're gonna get
favorite
into
moments
those too.
for my teams. The favorite moment, I mean, when I was 8, and I still remember some flashes in my mind from it. But in 1995, the Mariners won a 1-game playoff to go to the playoffs for the first time ever against the California Angels, 9-1. Luis Sojo hits basically a ground ball down the right field line, but it ends up becoming an inside the park grand slam. Bases were loaded. He hits like a triple, 3-run score. When they try to get the third runner out at home, they overthrow home plate. He comes in from third, 4 runs on that play. Randy Johnson, I remember, threw a great game. I don't remember like a ton of, I vaguely remember some of that. One of the things I remember is back in the 90s, it was kind of the era where you stopped seeing people run on the field. But prior to that, like, people would run on the field for all sorts of events. You remember like watching Hank Aaron hit the home run to pass Babe Ruth. People run on the field as he's rounding the bases, and all the old clips you'd see of like Reggie Jackson and stuff. When we won that game, a bunch of people ran out on the field like that in the 90s. And I'm telling my mom, I want to go out there. And the big clip I have is in my head of, the memory bank is her pointing out to me that there are people being arrested at the warning track. And she's like, look at them. The cops are taking them away. Like, you can't go out there. You're 8 years old. Stop. But I was like, no, you have to let me go out there. Like, this is the experience. Like, we're all got to go run on the field. So yeah, I mean, as an 8-year-old, that's the way that I went through those things. But yeah, that was one of them. The UW Huskies in 2023. I got to see the semifinal game in New Orleans, which was great. Obviously, they end up losing the championship to Michigan the next year. The other big one for me was the game when Ken Griffey Jr. returned to Seattle. He hits a home run in his first game back. Yeah. To make sure I had tickets to this game for when Griffey came back. For people who don't know, he leaves sort of in his prime, goes plays for the Reds for a long time, and he came back. He finished his career the last couple of years with Seattle. I bought group tickets, 40 tickets for that game, because they were on sale before individual tickets. I wanted to make sure I was there, and then got 40 friends and people to go with us. And we had this huge group of all these, friends of mine from high school, friends of mine from college. I was either in college or right after college at that time, in my 20s. We got this huge crew to go to this game and have a great time. And he hits a home run in his return, even though he's 39 years old and not even like a really great player anymore at this point. Just an incredible moment there. And then the other one would be the game 2 of the division series this year was pretty special. They lost game 1, and then they got out ahead against Tarek Skubal, who we're going to face tomorrow, a great pitcher. And then they blow that game, or they blow that lead, and they go. The Tigers even it up 2-2, and then right after they blow at the bottom of that inning, 1 out, Cal Raleigh, our MVP, hits a double. Then Julio Rodriguez, our other franchise player, hits a double right behind it. It was just a really cool moment of your superstar players being superstars, and a big moment to. You've blown this lead against this great pitcher. It feels like it's going to be just like yesterday's game that we lost the game 1. We're going to lose both games at home, and they came up huge. It was such a cool moment. So much anxiety in the stadium for that game. Yeah. After game 1 was just like a party the whole time. Everyone was happy, and we ended up losing in extra innings. It was a bummer. Game 2, the whole thing, completely different atmosphere. Just complete tension and stress, except for when we built a little lead in the middle innings. There was, okay, maybe we're going to win this game. And then they blew that. And I'm telling you, every time Cal Raleigh comes up to the plate these days, there's an MVP chant. No one was chanting. There was this tension. You could cut through it with a knife. He comes up to the plate, 1 out, nobody on. And I mean, there's no way he can't feel that, because every time when he's walking out to the bullpen to warm up the starting pitcher, they're chanting MVP. I mean, every time he steps on the field, it's the loudest thing in the world. And it's just like murmurs, and you can feel it. First pitch, rips it down the line for a double. I mean, talk about an MVP moment, carrying your team, your whole city. I mean, that was a really cool one in game 2. hopefully it matters. Hopefully they go out and win game 5 tomorrow.
Right on. Yeah, no, that's a huge one. But it's cool that you mentioned that Griffey one, because I remember, growing up here too. Just Griffey was everything to me, right? We shut down the clinic early. We went to that game. I got dropped off in the street so I could run in, be in there on time. And I mean, the whole place was crying when I was crying. Griffey's out there for the first time, a little speech and everything. It was as special as it gets. So I love that you bring that one up, because that's a good one. How about those bad experiences? What are the worst losses as a sports fan?
Yeah. For the Mariners, it was the 2001 team not even making the World Series. I don't really have specific memories of the individual games. Like I said, they lost 4-1. That was a series where they lost both the first 2 games at home, and then they went back to New York, and they weren't able to bring it back to Seattle, and the series was over. That was it. The season was over after 116 wins. The baseball seasons are so long, and that great season just built and built and built, and they seemed like they couldn't lose. I think one of the weird stats is they never lost 3 games in a row that whole season or something like that. I mean, it's just absurd. When they lost a game, they'd win the next game every time.
Yeah.
That's how you win 116 games. But that was a really tough one where I was, like a 14-year-old and was convinced that was going to be the World Series. It was the coolest thing ever. The 2023 UW Huskies football, I'm older at this point. It's not maybe the most painful loss, but to see them lose to Michigan in a game that I still think they could have won. Michigan ends up pulling away late, but there's several possessions in the second half where they're down by 1 touchdown and they have a chance to get back in that game, despite the fact they gave up some long runs early. But for the most part, other than the long runs they had given up, they had kind of done a pretty good job defensively as well. And I felt like they could shut down Michigan's offense for an extended period, and they did, but the offense just never got there. Michigan's defensive game plan was really good. Michael Penix throws a pick right away after halftime that was pretty deflating. He hit a Dunze for a long completion, then we get called for a holding that I still think was a horrible call. Terrible. One explosive play in the game, and then you don't get to build off that. So that was a tough loss. But the biggest ones are the Vikings. As an NFL fan, a football fan. 98, Gary Anderson's kick. That 98 team was so fun. Randy Moss's rookie year. As I said, I was already a huge fan, but Randall Cunningham comes in. He's like 37, 38 years old. Randall Cunningham was always such a fun, exciting player. This, mobile quarterback before mobile quarterbacks were a thing. For him to come in and have this rebound year where he's just throwing as far as he can, and Randy Moss is running underneath it as this rookie who's just, explode. Everyone has seen that clip of Randy Moss against the Cowboys. He wanted to play for the Cowboys, I think, or whatever, and the Cowboys didn't select him in that draft, and he goes and he plays the Cowboys on Thanksgiving, and 3 catches, 150 yards, 3 TDs or whatever it was, like 3 long touchdowns. And there's this clip of him talking to the camera on the sideline as they show his stats, and it's just like the greatest, aura moment, if you will, And so that team was so incredible. I still remember they were almost 16-0. The only loss was against Tampa, and it was a game they could have won. They lose the one game. They go 15-1. They're the presumptive favorites. They're winning against Atlanta. They're up by 7. Their kicker just needs to make like a 35-yarder to go up by 10 with like 2 minutes left. And he hasn't missed a kick all year. He's the first kicker in NFL history to not miss a kick in the whole regular season. And he pushes the kick wide. Falcons go down and tie the game, win the coin toss, and score. And Vikings, I don't think ever saw the ball again, if I don't recall. But that kick is the thing that everyone talks about and stands out because their kicker was so reliable all year. And then the 2009 Vikings as well, the Bounty Gate team. I mentioned my grandfather got me into the Vikings. My now wife and I drove out there just like impromptu to go watch the NFC Championship with him and my grandmother. And we bought matching Percy Harvin jerseys, I believe, or maybe that was a couple years later, but we had matching Percy Harvin jerseys at some point. But 2009, that would have been the 2009 Vikings, I think. Anyway, they were a really, really fun team, and to sit there and watch a game in his living room and have such a great time watching it, and then have Brett Favre throw that late interception, and another one where they lose in overtime. They lose because of a pretty ticky-tack defensive pass interference penalty and then a field goal on the first drive. And then the rules change because of that game. We're not going to allow playoff games to be decided by a coin toss and a field goal on the first drive. It's like, great. I mean, that doesn't help the Vikings. And that's another team that I think very easily could have won, won the Super Bowl just like the 98 Vikings. Those were some painful losses. And yeah, I mean,
that covers
it's been a long, the Mariners have just been bad for 20 years. So there's not as many like painful,
dramatic
losses.
Yeah, for sure. Well, how much did your passion for sports at an early age influence how you consume sports now and how you cover football now?
I mean, sorry, say it again.
Well, just how, your passion for sports at an early age. I'm sure, a lot of that had to do with I don't playing video games, playing sports,
Right.
watching sports. How does that affect how you consume sports now and how you cover football now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great. The reason I had to say it again is I'm trying to think of it's just like I've lived it, and I think probably the way that I'm talking about all these things and the different choices I've made. Oh, I have to be there for the Griffey thing, so I've I buy 40 tickets and then I'm like, I'll figure out the rest later. Or I go just drive to Montana to watch, a playoff game with my grandpa. I mean, it's been I guess I in a lot of ways define myself as a sports fan or through the sports fandom as a really huge part of who I am. And so in terms of how that influences the content that I make, I mean, there's a passion there, obviously. And, is the word that I think you just used, but I try to remember that and I try to keep that in mind. And, when I hear things from people who are playing fantasy football and they're new to it. And, I get a lot of feedback at Stealing Signals about the newsletter that, it's even more than the game recaps, which is what the article started as, is breaking down all the teams every week and the games and what's signal and what's noise. And, how do we build our teams throughout the season? Very, redraft focused. But I started writing introductions when I got to the newsletter, like what was the theme of the week and stuff. And I've gotten this feedback that even more than the game recaps, people really like the introductions. And this week's introduction was actually about tough losses because somebody was like, wrote in and I think they're a little bit of a newer subscriber. And they're like, hey, I had this really tough loss on Monday Night Football. And they had Brian Thomas. He caught that 33-yard pass. And then Travis Kelce came back and they were playing against Kelce. And Kelce catches a completely meaningless catch on the last play of the game. And they lose after they thought they had won and really needed to win. And it was a tough one for them. And I've always been so passionate about this stuff, I've always remained. I mean, some of that has dulled for me over the years as I'm approaching 40. It just naturally does. But I've always remained in touch with the original emotions that I had because it's always been so visceral for me since a very young age. I mean, it defined even before I knew fantasy, but it defined my early fantasy life, but it also defined my early life period as a kid and playing all the sports. And I can tell you the toughest losses I had we got beat on a half-court bank shot in the championship game when I was like 10 in rec league basketball. But I remember this kid chucking this ball up and banking it in, and we lost on a buzzer beater as like a small kid. I don't even know how I could throw it that far. It's just absolutely insane. But you remember these things when, it's a life lived and spent passionate about sports. And so it absolutely impacts my content and the things I do. Like I said, this week's introduction, once I saw that comment, was all about that. Was all about the past and the things that I've experienced. And then he was basically like, hey, does anyone have any advice because this is like depressing me. And I was like, yeah, I do have a lot of advice for this. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I've thought about how to cope with it and how to talk to other people about coping with it. And here's a whole, couple thousand words about that. So, I mean, that's awesome. It's absolutely what informs the content that I do.
So when along the lines did you discover fantasy sports?
I was visiting my grandpa and grandma, who I've talked about multiple times now, in Montana at their farm in Montana. And we used to ride the train out there sometimes. And me and my little sister rode the train out there. I'm 12 years old. She's 8. And it was not because I know this because it was 1999 is the first year I played fantasy football. And at the train station in Wolf Point, Montana, my grandma let me pick a magazine out. And I picked out a Sporting News magazine. And the last couple pages, there was fantasy. It was just in the last 5 pages. Fantasy Football Explained. But here's a schedule template. Here's a list of players, right? Different positions like rankings. And here's how it works. And I got home and I told my older brother about it. And we created some stuff on like literally in Word documents on the family computer for the first couple of years. And we did the newspaper thing and all that. And yeah, it was me and my older brother and some neighborhood kids. But I was a commissioner at 12 years old. I was that nerd that was, keeping the documents on the family computer. And the first year we only had 4 of us. We did a 4-person league because it was like the day before the season started. It was just like we did the draft, I think the night I got home off the train. And then the next year, we already had a full 12-team league. I mean, like
awesome.
People talked enough about it that we had this big league. And then within a couple years, I think we did 1 year on Yahoo, but then we were on ESPN starting in maybe 2004, I want to say. So I think we did 3 or 4 years off the internet, and then 1 year on Yahoo, and then over on ESPN. And the league's been there ever since. You can see the league history on ESPN to this day.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, my first time I played fantasy, it was 95. It was through Sporting News. They had like a fantasy challenge. I filled that out and
there you go.
And did that. That's where I was introduced. So I love that. So what was it early on that hooked you? What did you love about the game?
I think probably nothing too unique. It's just I was this huge sports fan, and I was also kind of a little bit of a numbers nerd. I was a math kid growing up, and so it was this intersection of the sport itself with the data. And I mean, I was always that sports data nerd. I mean, I still am. I still do. When we were kids, we would play wiffle ball in the backyard like anyone else, but we did it with a spiral notebook and had every team and every lineup. So we played 2 to 3 inning games so we could get through as many as possible to have like a whole season, because you got to play with every team. It takes forever. So we'd only have 6-man lineups, but we'd track home runs and RBIs. If you hit a home run over the fence, you had to go back to the notebook and write down who hit the homer and who had 2 RBIs. And then we had league leaders, and all that stuff. The tricky thing there is you can't hit home runs just because Griffey's up. You don't get any better as a kid. And in fact, you try really hard to hit a home run, and then you usually don't. So the league leaders were always the scrubs, because that's when you hit the home runs. It's when you're up there just swinging freely with the worst hitter on the team. But the whole thing, this is long before I found fantasy. The whole thing for us was just about, we're going to have our whole own season, and we're going to track the whole thing. And we did this for everything. I remember when we did it for college sports, the tricky thing was we tried to do, because you can't have too many teams, try to do just a top 25. But after a few games, you're like, okay, well, these teams would not still be ranked, because if the top 25 is only playing each other, then someone's got to be 0-3. And so now we have teams that are 0-3 in the top 25. So anyway, it was just building our own worlds. That was the stuff that we did as kids. And that's the same thing that, brought me to fantasy for sure.
Well, I imagine you play in a lot of fantasy leagues. Is there one that sticks out, like one main league, one league that means the most to you?
That one that I started in 99 is still around and still kicking. It's been going for 26 years or whatever it is. I have a college league that's been around for 15 years. Those are sort of the two. When I talk about home leagues, I basically have 2 home leagues that have been around for a long time, and a lot of history and all that stuff. So those are the main ones.
So is that ESPN one? Is that like mostly like family?
It is, yeah. Family and childhood friends, high school friends, awesome. And stuff that have been in it forever. My brother's son, my nephew, is now in it, and then we have step siblings, and my stepbrother's son has now also joined. So it started to pass on to the next generation as well. I have Amazing. 2 daughters. My daughter has not shown any interest, but I still run the thing, and I get to play with my nephews in it now, and so
that's awesome.
Quite fun, yeah.
That's awesome. So with these, some of these home league experiences over the years, have you had any that were, a ton of fun with traditions and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, the traditions. And so that league was the one that, as I said, we started at 12, or I was 12. My older brother was 14. Our stepbrother, who was in it right away, was 16. And that, you can imagine at those ages, as it's been running ever since, that we went through the gamut of all the stuff. We went through the controversies as teenagers, people trying to cheat, doing the stuff, dropping players the week before, trading players to their friend and trying to let their friend win. And we had to make all these rules to stop all the, collusion and all of these types of things. And we had 1 year where right before the championship, a team that had been eliminated dropped their whole roster, and we didn't have waivers, and so his best friend was in the championship and picked up like the best players up. Michael Vick was one of them. Like, I was like, well, and then, you have the whole controversy, right? Like this is stuff that happened in the 2000s. This doesn't happen as much anymore. I don't think.
I've seen all that. Yep.
Yeah. So, but those aren't the traditions in the early years were the live drafts. We always did the live drafts. I had I had this board. My parents owned a commercial printing and manufacturing company, and it was like big pieces of cardboard and folded up, and then we had sheets of basically tag board taped to it, and then drew up our own. Like you can buy the big live draft boards. Well, we had our own with Sharpie, and every year would tape over it and then draw the lines all over again, and then would write the names in different color Sharpies for different positions, even really before we knew that was a thing. This is kind of an intuitive idea. And we started doing that, in the early years, and I would always keep that board and I'd have it under my bed and then pull it out for the draft, because I'm in high school and I have this fantasy draft board under my bed. So the live draft stuff was the big tradition. Eventually, enough people moved away. We went to the online. It's kind of not the same thing. The other unique thing that we had was basically a toilet bowl that matters for the draft order for the next year. So you get the 6 losers are playing in their own tournament, whoever wins it, but it's a lotto. So whoever wins it gets the most lotto balls. And we would do a bingo machine, and we still do it. I still have the bingo machine. We do the lotto every year. And then it's not for draft position. It's for the right to select draft position. So the winner of the lotto gets to pick their draft slot and then on down the line. And the champion gets, there's 75 balls in this little bingo machine that I still have in my closet. Champion gets 1 ball, right? The runner-up and third place, they both get 2 balls. The winner of the toilet bowl gets 16 balls. So whatever that comes out to as far as their percentage, it's a pretty decent percent chance they're going to at least be in the top few. But there's been years where the runner-up gets the top pick because one of their 2 balls was the first one that came. So the lotto's been a long time tradition. That's pretty fun.
That's a great way to do it for sure. Now, consuming content early on when you were just enjoying the game, did you remember who you followed? Whose content you really enjoyed early on?
Yeah, so the leagues were on ESPN. Definitely read a lot of Matthew Berry, read, Chris Harris, Eric Karabell, all these guys back then. I used to read the Fantasy Football Index magazines back in the magazine days. You'd buy them. I used to that's the one I remember wanting to make sure to buy and read who they liked every year. And then I think they're actually published in the Seattle area, because I had a college friend who isn't even that into fantasy sports, but it was a literature major and worked at an internship for the Fantasy Football Index magazine doing some editing, which was kind of fun. I think Draft Sharks was one of the first paid sites I subscribed to for a few years and liked their product. So yeah, definitely. I've read a lot of different types of fantasy content in terms of my journey to doing content. You can imagine, as the person that I've sort of described myself as, it was very into all this stuff at a young age. I consumed a lot of sports related and fantasy related content. So anyone that has been around for a long time, I got a chance to work at CBS. Those guys, I definitely had read a lot of their work when I was younger. Jamie Eisenberg, Dave Richard, I could name every person that's been, I've probably come across their content at some point. There's years where I bought several different magazines and read all the magazines. And so anyway, that was a big time for fantasy content. It was cool. You buy the magazines, you had all these different avenues, and yeah, I consumed a lot.
Now, what inspired you to dive in and start creating content yourself?
I just think the passion for it, boredom in my own career at the time. I graduated from UW in 2009 with a finance degree. So the 2008 financial crisis happened during my senior year, in the fall of my senior year. I had a teacher tell me to stand up in front of the class and throw our textbook away, say it was completely worthless, in the middle of the quarter, in the middle of our class. Okay, well, I spent a bunch of money on that. Had another one take a call from an AP reporter and basically just berate this call, and it's this is going to be your lesson for the day. I'm gonna do this interview. They've been hounding me for it, because he had written a piece about the subprime mortgage crisis the year prior, and he was very frustrated that no one cared when he was saying that this was going to be an issue, and now that it had become an issue, they wanted comment from him because they were digging up, oh, this has been written about before, this person's an expert on it. So he had us listen to him give quotes to an AP reporter as our lesson plan for the day, and just a random class. And anyway, I more or less graduated without any career prospects, because there were not a lot of finance companies out there interested. Few years of sort of toiling around. I worked at a credit union for a bit, was working at a small business, and I was passionate about this stuff. And I had a lot of unchecked sort of ambition that I decided to channel this direction for whatever reason and start, getting the opportunity to start doing content, and started doing it in 2015 and been doing it for 10 years now.
What's the timeline? Where did it start in 2015? And then, obviously up till today, you got your Substack. You're also doing Stealing Bananas podcast. What's been the timeline for you?
I started in 2015. I started sort of coming out of my shell, or reaching out, or believing that I could maybe be a part of something by applying for the PFF. Like every year they find like new game charters, and so I applied to be a charter for the 2015 season, and I went through an off-season thing where they had you do sample games, and I did really well. I'm sort of like anal about stuff, and so when I went through the sample games, I did them very meticulously, and I heard that out of like 500 people that applied, that they wouldn't tell me exactly where I fit in, but they said there was like 9 different grading things, and I was green in all 9, and more or less got the impression that I was one of the top like 5 or so charters as far as accuracy. The way that they would do it is they would send you back a spreadsheet. You would chart like 1,000 data points in a game, because it was 22 players on a play, and then 150 plays, and it's like a ton, several thousand. And they'd send you back a spreadsheet, and then it would highlight, in conditional formatting, it would highlight the differerences and be like, these are your errors, and then tell you to go back and look and figure it out. There were a couple errors that from the sample that I went back and checked, and I was right. And so I went back to them, and I was like, well, this is just heads up, a little note. And one of them was the Patriots Seahawks Super Bowl, and the Seahawks rotated their linebackers one play, and I caught it. Like their middle linebacker actually lined up on the outside, and they really did like a unique thing. And everyone else was just putting the linebackers in the same alignment every play. And I went back and watched it, and I'm like, no, I have it right. Like where they told me that this linebacker is and where this stuff is. And there was another player, I remember they put in their secondary tight end. And man, I can't remember the tight end's name right now, but for one snap. And I went back and watched it. I'm like, no, that's him. I found like an angle. I'm like, no, they changed this once. Like the thing that they said I got wrong was I changed one player for one snap, and they're like, well, you're off. It should just be the same as it has been. It's like, no, they did something different on that play. Anyway, I still remember this to this day, because I reached out to him, and there was a little bit of back and forth, and went through the rest of the offseason. And ultimately I was a little bit too meticulous about it. The way that they like to do their charting is relatively quick. Like they would tell you this like relatively quickly, and they pay you per game, and they have multiple people chart it. And so then when there is a discrepancy between those multiple people, that's how they go back and look at them. But I don't necessarily think that they catch every single thing in that regard. And that was actually kind of a problem for me at the time. I'm sure they're much better at it now. But at the time I was like, well, I mean, I'm under the belief that this is really, really accurate. And that's the whole point. But it doesn't seem like, people care that I've gotten a couple of these things wrong. Not to talk bad about them or anything, but I ended up before the season being like, I actually don't want to do this. But because I had gone through that process and kind of gotten validated a little bit, I then was like, well, maybe I'll reach out to my favorite fantasy site, which at the time was RotoViz. I had just found them the year prior, 2014. And I didn't know this at the time, but they had just started in 2013. But there was a lot of overlap in this focus on upside and on youth. And I had Odell Beckham in my home league and won the league in 2014. And a lot of the stuff that they were talking about with youth and upside and late season, ceilings and these things that RotoViz still talks about, and a lot of the fantasy community talks about, was very important, or it hit me right where I thought was very interesting. And Sean Siegel had written the 2013 Zero RB, the first Zero RB piece, and we had a guy in our long running home league who just liked to try fun stuff. And so back in the day, once we switched to PPR, he would always go wide receiver, and we'd always laugh at him. And I told you we could pick our own draft slot. He loved to take the 12th slot and go wide receiver, Torrey Holt, Terrell Owens, or Randy Moss, and get 2 stud receivers. And we were all like, God, you got to go running back. You got to take at least one running back. What are you thinking? And he'd always do pretty well. And I thought it was really interesting. And I started to start thinking about this idea of, man, we do take a lot of these running backs early, but they get injured. There's all these concerns about it. So when I got a chance to read the Zero RB piece, I was like, man, this is something that I believe is very interesting. And the way that Sean articulates it in the piece and the tenets and the reasons that you can rethink how you address the running back position from a draft capital standpoint in an overall draft, I thought were so fascinating. So anyway, I reached out to the guy who was running the site at the time, was known as the Fantasy Douche. He goes by Fantasy Douche, goes by Frank Dupont, a lot of different pseudonyms. Reached out to him, had a little back and forth. The first advice he gave me, because I wrote him such a long, sort of passionate email, was don't try to answer all of the questions of fantasy football in one piece. Like, try to narrow your focus. And so I was like, all right, great. He gave me an idea of one of the things I've been talking about with Sean Payton's running back stuff. And he's like, why don't you write me a piece on, Sean Payton stuff? We'll see if it's good enough to publish. I wrote him the whole piece by the next day. It was all about why CJ Spiller had top 10 PPR upside. That definitely hit. He crushed that year. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously did not for the Saints, but it was, CJ Spiller was going to step into this great role. They published it the next day. I got a chance to write for him the rest of that season. That was in August of 2015. Got a chance to write for him that season. They asked me to be an editor the next year, which was really cool because that was a small group of really sharp guys. It includes Kevin Cole, who's gone on to do awesome stuff in the industry, Nick Giffen, RotoDoc, who does Action Network work now, and Frank himself. And it was this small group of editors that I got a chance to interact with early on all through 2016 as an editor at RotoViz, and then was at RotoViz through 2017, was at Roto Grinders for 2018, and then CBS 2019, 2020, which was just an awesome, incredible opportunity. Chris Towers brought me in, and so grateful to him, and Jamie and Dave and Heath and Adam Azer. Those guys they're just awesome human beings. So cool to be a part. The hardest thing about leaving there and the timing of everything with the pandemic and everything was that I really enjoyed working with those guys, and the fit was cool. And they never made me feel like I was the new guy or the bottom of the totem pole or whatever. It was so awesome. Genuinely just a really cool experience for me to get to work, with people that I had known about and looked up to and admired for years, and have them treat me like a peer and an equal in a way that maybe not even at some of the other sites I didn't necessarily get treated that way early on. Although, RotoViz and RotoGrinders and those sites were always amazing. But the energy at CBS was just very cool is the point. Is more of a positive note about CBS than a negative about anywhere else. But that was super, super cool. But I ended up leaving there, going off on my solo journey, and got the newsletter, and the newsletter's been pretty successful.
It's awesome. So what's been the most rewarding part of this experience in the fantasy industry for you?
It's the respect that I've earned from my peers. I don't have the biggest following as like some of the other people that came up around my time have hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers, and they've done a lot to, make themselves more noticeable. And I still get the people that, are sort of like, who's this guy? They don't necessarily know who I am, but I'm super proud that the people who know what they're talking about think that I'm one of the best to do it. I get that feedback a lot from the people in the industry. I have good relationships with every person that I admire. Evan Silva, within 1 year of me doing content in 2016, said, hey, if you're ever in Chicago, if you want to get together. And so I bought a ticket to go fly to Chicago and go meet Evan Silva, because I was like, I want to go meet this guy. I got a chance to talk it with and meet Matthew Berry within a couple years of starting my content career, and have had a good relationship with him over the years. There's basically, all these different names and people that I've gotten a chance to meet and work with and interact with. I have heard a lot of positive feedback from, and that a lot of people that I really respect my work as well. And that's a very fulfilling thing. That's the part of it that for me has always been, I love the audience and the subscribers and those types of people, but to start working in an industry that you followed for your whole life, and to pretty quickly get the respect of the people at the very top of it that think that you're one of the best to do it. That's been really, really cool.
Well, I can relate to that story, because I've heard people talking about you in private settings. I've heard Mike Wright from the Fantasy Footballers talk about how much your content impacts how he sees things. So it's cool, and it is true. I think the respect from others is really awesome. The fantasy community is pretty amazing as well. What advice do you have for people out there that want to get more involved in the industry or in the community doing content?
I got asked this a lot coming up, and I always was I've always had my DMs open on social, and I always took the time to write lengthy replies, and I always get the feedback back that was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe how much you wrote." But I'm like, and this is how I think. I write and I talk, and it all comes out. So I used to give a ton of advice. I don't think I'm the right person to ask in 2025 though, because so for me it was I'm not good at social media. I'm not good at like navigating the algorithm and these things. I was able to rely on word of mouth more. And I think that's difficult in 2025 in our industry now with the way that things are set up. I think you have to have some skills to navigate the algorithms and the different platforms to get your work in front of eyeballs that I don't have. I've never had. I think back and think about how fortunate I was. And, even just growing the newsletter, I think I had such a first mover's advantage. I got in when Substack was young and exciting. And that's why multiple people told me, hey, you should try Substack. And during the pandemic, one of the things that a lot of people did do was subscribe to newsletters. There was a boom in newsletters, and I got a lot of people looking at newsletter content. Oh, maybe I'll try fantasy football in a newsletter form. And now I've been able to retain that because I do good work. But the element of how I got to where I could get the eyeballs on the work is something that I'm not trying to pull the ladder up behind me. I can't I don't know how to help people with that. So it's been tricky for me when I get this question in the last couple of years, because I do think the answer is more around building a brand and building a presence to get your eyeballs on things in social media, or whether that's on YouTube or whether that's on TikTok or however you're navigating it. I do think you want to learn those skills, and I think you want to develop that stuff as much as you're developing your analysis and those things. People always say, find a niche concept, develop something that is not, that is filling a hole that is needed in the industry and all that stuff. There's a lot of people that do really good work that is just buried and they can't get it out there, and they try their best, but it's really hard to get people's eyeballs on your work in the 2025. There's so many people doing content, and people are used to just ignoring, even hearing, positive word of mouth feedback. And word of mouth is already very challenging in fantasy football, because my biggest subscribers tell me all the time they don't share my work because they're playing against their buddies in their leagues. Yeah. They don't want anyone else. They're like, hey, I'm sorry. I'd love for as a fan to be able to share it, but we're not doing content that is easily shareable to your friend that you want to just talk about. We're doing content that's to help you beat your friend. And those people don't want to share that content. They're like, you're my edge. So yeah. A lot of that stuff is really tricky, I think, in 2025, how you get in front of enough people, because there's always going to be people that don't like your style and all that. It is about marketing and getting in front of enough faces and all of that. And it's not a skill of mine, but that's the advice for me is, do you have those skills? Can you develop the brand in addition to the analysis? I think both those are so important.
Yeah, that's great advice for sure. Now, obviously, networking is important. There's events like the Fantasy Football Expo. It's great. A lot of people there, content creators, aspiring content creators, different, brands, brand ambassadors, all there, kind of meeting people, meeting each other and getting to know people. That's obviously a great way to do it. The Scott Fishbowl live event is cool now. You got these multiple cities. You got Scott Fishbowl drafts going. You were huge. You were huge in Seattle for me. I hosted the Seattle live draft, and you came just to help, and you were a massive amount of help. How was that experience for you attending a live Scott Fishbowl draft?
It was super fun. We had talked in past years, and I was, trying to get involved and help and give back. It was one of the things that I took from CBS. I know Heath Cummings is very involved in that stuff. And all those guys, they do a draft-a-thon for St. Jude every year at CBS that I still go and do a guest appearance on every year right before week 1, but they raise a bunch of money for St. Jude every year. And everyone at CBS in the CBS fantasy group especially cares so much about the same things that Scott Fish cares about in those things. And it's important that we use these platforms to help, whoever we can in the ways that we can, because we're all fairly privileged to get to spend our free time playing fantasy sports. I mean, that's just one of those realities. If you're pretty big in fantasy sports, you probably don't have the hardest life of all the people that are on this planet. So and I'm not obviously telling anyone that their life's not hard, but I'm in a position where I want to try to help as much as I can. And I wanted to help run the thing last year. We didn't end up getting it together. I was so grateful that you took the lead on that and got us a place and got everything set together. But I had told you, hey, if you ever get it done, I'll do whatever I can to help. And so, yeah, I mean, I was happy to come show up, and it was so fun to just to be there on the day and experience all that. I can't wait to do it again and keep building those relationships. Once, you see the same types of people 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row. I've done some stuff with the ship chasing community. Peter Overzet and Pat Crane have developed, and I worked with them for 4 or so years doing live streams on YouTube. And we would have annual ship chasing meetups. And I still went to the one this past year in Miami, but several years in a row in Vegas. And the second year and the third year, and you start to meet and see the same faces and get to meet all these people. I've developed so many friends that were just, watchers of that YouTube show, that weekly show, but are, good buddies. You meet like-minded people that are similar to you, that think about things similarly to you. It's very, very cool to meet kind of your people. And that's what these events are. And so I have a blast doing them. I have not made it to the expo yet. I've always hated that it's right in the middle of when I'm absolutely grinding content, but they're bumping it back to July next year, I think. Yes. So I'm thinking loosely, tentatively, I might make my expo debut next year. I'm pretty excited.
I love it. Well, you'd be welcome in Canton. That'd be a great addition to the group. And yeah, I think that hopefully that July date helps with a lot of people, because August, mid-August, early August, mid-August, that's a tough time for people to make it work. But again, you were massive at the SFB live draft in Seattle. Huge MVP for me, for sure, coming down there and help run that draft board and meeting and greeting people. That was great. But obviously we got, we're in the 2025 season. We're going to talk a little bit about the Stacked League. You were involved in a pretty awesome charity fantasy football league. I'm doing a little bit of coverage for that. And it's fun. I mean, you got $10,000 going to charity, $5,000 going to Fantasy Cares. You got $5,000 going to the charity of choice of the winner. When it comes to your charity of choice, what is that for this season for you?
Yeah, it's Mary's Place. It's an organization that helps women and children that are dealing with homelessness. And I'm a father of 2 daughters and was mostly raised by my mom, and my parents separated young. I mean, my dad's a great dad, but I mostly raised by my mother, and care a lot about the women in my life. And obviously, doing what we can to support women and children that are in tough spots, I think is an extremely important cause.
It's awesome. I'm a girl dad myself, so I appreciate that very much. Now, what was it that made you want to compete in this league? Because there's a lot of headliners, a lot of people you mentioned earlier on as people that you admired, when you were consuming content as a young player.
Yeah, I mean, getting asked to do it, I think, was such an honor. Like I said, I don't have the hugest following. I mean, my newsletter does really well, and all that, but a lot of these other names on here are the ones that you see in all the industry leagues. I don't necessarily always get asked to do the industry leagues, and so getting an invite and getting an opportunity to compete with some of these guys. I mean, some of them, like Dave Richard, for example, is in the league, and I got a chance to play with him in a bunch of CBS leagues when I was at CBS for a couple seasons there, and I've definitely played in leagues with several of these guys before. In a dynasty league with Soccer Dave, who is in this as well. The opportunity to play in a league like this for me is more or less like a can't miss opportunity. I wasn't gonna, pass up the chance. So getting asked was very cool, and it's been a fun league.
Well, it has been fun. It's fun to see the waiver wire, all the action. There's a lot going on currently. Dave Richard and Kendall Valenzuela from Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life are sitting there at 4-1 top of the league. There is a last place punishment in this league, and so far, Greg Branos is 0-5. Rough start. Hopefully he can turn it around. We'll see how that ends up. But obviously after your week 5 matchup with Andrew Cooper, you failed at 2-3. You were sitting there primed, ready to win that match. And then the Brian Thomas catch happens at the end of the game, right? That's what happened, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I had Xavier Worthy. He had Thomas. We're basically going head to head, and I had a multiple point lead. And Thomas, it's half PPR. Thomas could have caught 2 short passes even in that last drive. Jacksonville had the ball. And I'm like, I mean, they're going to have to try to move the ball down the field. In the modern NFL, the good deep receivers don't just get one-on-one on the outside against a single high safety. It doesn't happen. And the Chiefs inexplicably just let Brian Thomas win on one-on-one on the outside against a single high safety that was late getting over for a 33-yard gain. I'm like, not just like that I just lost my fantasy matchup by 1 point. Although if Worthy would have caught a pass on the way back, I would have had, the one coming back that could have stole it. There was a throw on second down where Mahomes threw it sort of towards Worthy and Hollywood Brown, and neither of them was looking. I don't know if anyone remembers that last Chiefs drive, but I was like, oh, that's going to Worthy. And then it like kind of zoomed past Hollywood Brown's face. Neither of them was really looking. So I almost came back and won it the other way back, but lost that game by 1 point because of a 33-yard gain, 3.8 point play in a situation where, I mean, from a real football perspective, I don't understand how it happened. I don't like, what are they doing? And they went on to lose the game because of it. It was nonsense.
A less than 1 point loss. That's gotta just drive you crazy, especially with the way you look at football, the way you watch it, and you see the dysfunction that happens, and you can't explain why. Like that's pretty wild. But again, it's been fun to see this. There's a lot of action on the waiver wire. I can't not ask you about week 5 because most waiver wire transactions in this league have been super conservative. Every week, you last week did go 59 or 58 or $59 for Malik Washington. Explain the thought behind that move, because it definitely caught some people off guard.
Yeah, I got asked about it a lot. I was kind of surprised it caught people off guard. I mean, I'm more with Kendall, who is running away with it. In week 1, she came out bidding aggressively. In week 2, she came out bidding aggressively, was able to make some early buys. I'm a pretty aggressive bidder. I felt like everyone was being conservative, mostly because there wasn't a whole lot of high profile stuff. But I had kind of been anticipating, and I've been in a lot of analyst leagues, and people are usually pretty flippant with their fab in analyst leagues. I had been anticipating that we were going to have some aggression. And since I made that bid, there's been a few more high bids that have been a little bit like $26 bids or something on guys that I'm like, I mean, he's probably not worth that. But the argument that for taking for putting that amount of money on Malik Washington is not that I think Malik Washington's worth it, because I just made that comment as well. The way I approach fab is it's not what's the player worth. It's two things. It's what's he going to go for, and then do I want him? And my team needed help and needs help and has a lot of players that are not probably elite players, unfortunately. So I did a double elite onesie build. I took Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round. I took Brock Bowers at the end of the second, Lamar Jackson at the beginning of the third. They're both hurt. So a big thing that really hurt about this less than 1 point loss you mentioned last week is that I was without both of my double elite onesies in a double elite onesie build. You already know that you're going to be thin at the flex positions at running back and receiver. When you do that, you need a point differential that makes up for that from QB and from tight end to justify that decision. I'm streaming Sam Darnold and Dalton Schultz at those positions this week, trying to make it work, trying to piece things together. And it's been frustrating because I did fall to 2 and 3, but I could have won basically all 3 of those games. The one that I didn't really have a chance on was against Justin Boone, but the way that I'm talking about it in my head is he had the Vikings defense that week where they scored 35 points, and I lost by less than the differential in the defensive points. So anytime you lose by just defensive points, I'm like, man, this is annoying. The other 2 weeks literally came down to a start-sit. I was debating on Sunday morning my different wide receiver positions. I wound up putting Jerry Jeudy in. He's been a headache all year. In the London game, he gets me 2.5 points. I had Wan'Dale Robinson on the bench, who I was thinking about playing. Didn't have a huge game, but would have been enough for me to win. Obviously, without Malik Neighbors, Robinson had the potential to get quite a few more targets. Decided to go with Jeudy in a half PPR league. Ended up, last minute decision for the second time this year now, costing me in a close loss. And my team's not a super high scoring team, but for a team that went double elite onesie that's not really getting the advantage of that, I think it is kind of scratching and clawing. But the Malik Washington bid was, hey, I got these guys like Jerry Jeudy. Xavier Worthy's been hurt. Jordan Addison came back from suspension. I think he's a good play. For me, Malik Washington was a very extreme play one way or the other. He was either going to do what happened last week, which is he basically didn't get any expansion of his role. Nick Westbrook-Akine added a ton of routes, and Darren Waller added a bunch of routes. And Westbrook-Akine didn't even get any targets in the game, but he added all those downfield routes that I thought Washington might add. He already had a significant manufactured touch sort of gadgety role. And I thought the potential, because he's already their motion man and all this stuff, that the potential for him to do the motion releases, they get the free releases in this offense where they use motion to run the vertical routes. And they've done that with Tyreek Hill for years. And it just seemed really logical that it would be Washington. Washington's profile, very strong. Led FBS in receptions his final season at Virginia, 110 receptions. He had 20 targets and 16 catches in the last 4 games last year. And in their first preseason game with Tyreek out and Waddle out, they threw to him 4 times on the first drive. They already showed it with Tua in there. They showed Mike McDaniel showed a game plan in preseason that was basically treating Malik Washington as the first read on everything, like the Tyreek Hill thing. So my take on Washington was the upside case was that he could do kind of what Jonnu Smith did last year. Jonnu Smith, 9 catches first 4 games of the year. And then the last 8 or 10 games, whatever it was, he had double-digit PPR points every game. Because in Mike McDaniel's offense, if you're one of the guys that he's scheming up for, you can really consolidate touches. Tua does not scramble anymore very much with the concussion stuff. They get the ball out quickly. You get a lot of catches. You get a lot of touches. This is an offense where you can really consolidate volume. And so I thought this was a player that had this type of ceiling where if he gets into this role, I'd be starting him every week. And that's what I'm looking for on the waiver wire is the high ceiling plays. So did I think he was worth $59? No. Did I think that he would generate a ton of interest because we do early Tuesday morning waivers and it was a high profile Monday night injury? I did think that. 6 people bid on him.
6 bids.
Half of the league. 2 people bid $18 and no one else in that run went for more than 13. So 2 other people thought it was at least 5% of the budget more than any other bid on the week. They thought he was the clear target. Now, no one went higher than 18 and I went to 59. And then you're like, well, God, I spent a ton of money I didn't need to spend. But I do think there's a valid argument to be made that there was the type of interest that I thought there might be that could justify a big bid. It's just that there was no one else in the 11 people in this league that thought 50% of the budget was anywhere near what they needed to spend. And in fairness, I probably did go quite a bit higher, and I think that was stupid in hindsight. But I did think he was going to generate a lot of interest. And so the 2-part question of what's he going to go for, I thought the possibility for him to go for a significant bid, a little bit higher than any of the highest bids we had seen, which, as I mentioned, I think Kendall had done the highest bid to that point in the 30% range. I'm like, well, I think he could go for 50%. So I go a little higher than that. I go $59 out of 100 total. Aggressive bid, no question. Also, I got an injured team, and I feel like I need to win some games in the short term. And I think this is a player that could be a pretty big impact if the role evolves the way that I described. If he's the new Jonnu Smith, essentially. Now, I know people are like, well, why wouldn't you think Darren Waller's the new Johnny Smith? A lot of Jonnu Smith's usage was around the line of scrimmage, catch and run, quick hits, all of that stuff that they like to do in this offense. Waller's a more vertical receiver. I think of him more like what Gesicki was in Mike McDaniel's first year in this offense, or what Jalen Waddle has been. Tyreek Hill has been some vertical targets, but a lot around the line of scrimmage as well. Well, Waddle has been the higher ADOT vertical receiver. I thought Waller and Waddle would both be more vertical guys and that they need to answer this question around the line of scrimmage. I think that's going to be Achane. I don't think they really think it's going to be Washington. Washington's role might still develop. We'll see, but Waller did get a vertical target last week, which was one of the big catches, and he's got that red zone role, sees the routes increase. Maybe I have that wrong, but I think Waller is more of a vertical tight end than a catch and run tight end. I think they're different players. And so I think Washington, great athlete, closest thing they have on the roster athletically to Tyreek Hill as well in terms of tested athleticism. Washington, a lot. And if you look at Washington's stats, another thing I'll point out, he already has a punt return for a touchdown this year. I mean, this guy's very dynamic with the ball in his hands. The idea that Mike McDaniel might go out of his way to, scheme up a large percentage of his offense, and that Miami's offense is uniquely creative in that regard, and how it can be so valuable for fantasy when you're one of those guys that McDaniel is scheming everything up for, because he's the quintessential coach of thinking players, not plays. He thinks about what player do I want to feature in my game plan. I think now it's going to be Waddle and Achane with a little bit of Waller as sort of that third option, and then Washington still is gadget fourth guy. I thought the possibility existed for Washington to elevate right there with Achane and Waddle, and so that was what I was targeting.
Well, plenty of season left to be had with that to see what happens. I think that you clearly analyze the situation, and you got to take risk in fantasy, right? You got to take risk, and the situation is there. You said you got Lamar, you got Bowers, you had Worthy out, like. Your team was in a place to get 2 wins with that schedule, and to lose a game by less than a point. Pretty amazing where you're at, just given all things considered. And yes, you have to swing for the fences. You see the waiver wire this week. You got Kimani Vidal going, at the top bid. You managed to snag Caleb Johnson, Keaton Mitchell. Obviously, you got a budget. You got $7 left. Presumably, obviously, you're taking flyers on upside guys, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Caleb Johnson, I just cut Gainwell because I had so many injuries that I had to fill spots, and I had to cut Gainwell over his bye. I'd probably prefer to have Gainwell over Caleb Johnson, but part of the reason I cut him was basically I think week 4 is going to pretty comfortably go down as his best game of the year. Warren's going to be back. And then Caleb Johnson, I think coming out of the bye, you have the potential for the post-bye rookie bump, potential that they want to continue to work with him. He's really struggled in the pass game, but they think he's a talented runner. And so I picked him up as sort of an upside swing on seeing if maybe he has a little bit more of a role out of the bye. Even though Gainwell had the big week 4, it doesn't guarantee anything in an Arthur Smith offense. They'll go right back to making him the RB3 if that's what they think is best next week. Now, Gainwell played really well. I don't think that's what they're going to think is best, to be clear. I do think Gainwell's worth rostering. I had a little bit of a bigger bid on Gainwell, didn't get him. But I do think part of the reason I was willing to cut Gainwell over his bye when I needed to make roster space is I do think, like I said, that week 4 was in part just because Warren was a late scratch. They probably didn't think they had Caleb Johnson ready to go yet. A lot of teams use the bye to work on those things with the rookies, and then we see the post-bye bump. So anyway, I would have preferred to get Gainwell back, but part of the reason I was willing to let him go was after a huge week was that Caleb Johnson was there. And so that's sort of part of bringing him back. Keaton Mitchell, similar sort of upside play, knew he'd be active for the first time, wanted to see what that looked like, probably comfortable re-releasing him as we go forward, but going to continue to shuffle and juggle and try to find something for upside in this league.
Is that build you had with at the second spot with Jameer and then coming back and getting Bowers and Lamar and then going 4 wide receivers in a row and then cleaning up with some later running backs, which includes like Cam Scatterbo? Was that kind of a normal build for you in that position, or did you do something different in this league?
No, I mean that's very common for me. I was the guy who actually coined the term running back dead zone while at CBS, or I got to give Chris Towers, my editor, the shout out for coining the term. I wrote the piece, but he edited the piece and called it the running back dead zone. And so I very much ascribe to this philosophy that you don't want to be paying for running back volume in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6. I think you want to be building wide receiver depth in those rounds. And especially if I go double elite onesie. Now, it's not common for me to go double elite onesie, but I think if you do want to do that, and I don't think there's enough discussion of whether you can, there's such a common discussion point in the fantasy space. It's basically like, well, all quarterbacks and tight ends are the same. Like the way that I heard some people talk about my build afterward was like, well, I mean, apparently Lamar Jackson and Brock Bowers are going to score the same amount of points as every other quarterback and tight end. Well, that would really invalidate the logic behind drafting them where I did. The point is that they're going to give you a positional advantage, and it's worked with Lamar. I mean, you're trying to take a strategy that helps you win a 12-person league where you start at an 8.3% chance of winning, and you're trying to maximize that. If you hit on this double-edged sword of both Lamar and Bowers being key positional advantages, as long as you're able to fill the other spots, and that's the fascinating thing is I have a 2-3 team that's middle of the pack in scoring, despite Bowers being nothing. I mean, he gets hurt week 1, plays through injury for 2 weeks, and now he's going to miss a couple of games. And Lamar has been more or less has proven the thesis, but in a consistently really high scoring and things, but is now injured as well. And so trying to navigate all that is tough. But the reason that I do that is I'm trying to find a running back whose value, because running back is a position that's the easiest to see the value gain from those late rounds. That's the part of like zero RB that doesn't get talked enough about. When people come at zero RB, it seems like all they focus on is defending the value of early round running backs, which is fine. I that's a conversation we can have. But what about the point that I went anchor running back in this and I took Gibbs, but I took all these receivers and everything from a total value perspective from my roster. Stacking a bunch of late running back picks gives me a lot of shots at this type of player that can gain a ton of value. And that was, as you mentioned, Cam Scatterbo. I also had Dylan Sampson, who I used the first couple weeks. He quickly lost favor, but I got points out of him in weeks 1 and 2. I took him after Scatterbo. And then I started using Scatterbo. I took Tyjae Spears before the preseason injury. That was tough. And I took him not long after all of Jaylen Warren, J.K. Dobbins, and Jordan Mason went. And when I talked to some people pre-season about my draft strategy, I said, man, when I go anchor running back or zero RB, I really like for this year, I really like to get one of Mason or Warren or Dobbins. And they all went in the round prior to where I re-broke the seal on running back. I took Scatterbo instead. I'm glad that I have Scatterbo at this point, obviously, but I would have loved to have gotten a rookie like Scadaboo and paired him with a veteran that I thought had a better early season role, like a Warren or a Dobbins. Those veterans usually always exist. But my team this year is evidence that even when you don't get to those guys in a build, and the guy you do take is Tyjae Spears, and it goes bad, you can still get there through, I ended up starting a rookie the first couple of weeks and then playing Scadaboo. My RB2 spot has not been the weakness of this team at all. It's been a strength. Jahmyr Gibbs has been a strength. I was able to flex Kenneth Gainwell that 1 week that I picked him up as a spot start, which added some more running back potential. The weakness has been my double elite onesies, especially now that Lamar is hurt. And then the receivers that I picked as well. Xavier Worthy gets hurt week 1. What are you going to do? Brock Bowers gets hurt week 1. What are you going to do? I mean, these things are going to happen. Jerry Jeudy was my 6th round pick, has struggled throughout. Addison I took in the 7th round. Some question there for my build in terms of taking a suspended player on a team that was going to be thin at the flex positions, but I think he has incredible upside. And I think he started to show that in these 2 weeks that I've been able to play him in weeks 4 and 5. And so I have George Pickens on this team as well. If Worthy, Pickens, Addison, Jeudy, if those guys are able to score more points going forward than they did coming up to this point, my receivers and my running backs will work out okay. The question is, can I get Lamar and Bowers back and score enough points and have those guys be hammers? It's not looking great. This build is not. Sometimes your builds don't go the way that you plan them out. There's been a lot of injuries. There's been a lot of issues. I do think from a build perspective, if you want to execute double elite onesie, if you do want to make aggressive plays on those types of things, and I think, for example, Lamar Jackson has shown that he was worth the early ADP. I mean, he was worth it in spades until the injury happened. If you want to make those bets that onesies can be worth high draft capital, this is how you execute it. You take a lot of receivers in those mid rounds. You take the running backs later because they can gain a ton of value in the way that you don't see it as much with receivers. It's a lot more difficult at the wide receiver position. It hasn't panned out for me. I think the framework is solid and is there.
I love it. And you took Gibbs, ahead of Bijan, ahead of Saquon. I love the style, the strategy. You see, that's how you see it. You do it, and you made it happen. And he's been phenomenal. Week 6, you got Andy Barron's coming up. He's a 3-2 team. You got to obviously bring him back to the pack. When you look around these rosters, though, is there one team that you look at as like that's the team I got to beat? That's the team that's got the most talented roster.
Well, you mentioned that I play in a lot of leagues. I play in like 30-something managed leagues, so I haven't been like scouring the rosters a ton. But I do know that my old colleague Dave Richards doing really well. I saw that he was able to add another key player. He had Rico Dowdle last week. He added him. It's so funny. I had Dowdle on my roster because Hubbard was banged up and cut him to add Kenneth Gainwell for the spot start that was really huge for me in week 4. And it was kind of the same play. Well, Warren's going to be out. Well, I'll cut the guy that I was holding when Hubbard was banged up the week prior, but Hubbard played. And then Hubbard was banged up again. And Dave was able to add Dowdle and spot start him. And obviously, in hindsight, I'm like, wow, I wish I would have kept Dowdle. But I cut him to add a different running back spot start that helped me get the win in week 4. Dave making smart managerial decisions in addition to the fact that his roster is very strong. He has James Cook and he has Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devon Achane on this team. Very, very fun team. I think things are kind of going well for him, and this may be the Dave Richards season in this league. And then you mentioned Kendall, who's also up in first place, has Javonte Williams and got Quinshon Judkins. The news sort of broke. I know some people were mad. The news sort of broke when she was on the clock, and not mad, but she got the bump there. Also has Quentin Johnston bid. That was one of her aggressive early bids that's been paying off for her. Puka Nacua on this team as well. So her team is very, loaded. Very fun as well. So, those teams out in the front are the ones that it's starting to look like things are tilting toward them. It's one of these leagues where the top teams are very good.
Yeah, those 4-1 teams are definitely talented. I know that Matthew Berry did a review of the league before the season started. He picked Dave Richards' team to win it all. So he wanted to pick Kendall probably, but he felt like there was some bias. But he picked Dave. So I mean, Dave's been obviously at the top from the beginning, but we'll see. It's a long season, plenty of football to be played. Before we wrap things up, tell me what's going to happen with these Mariners. What's going to happen this postseason? What happens Friday night? And what happens moving forward?
Well, I mean, Friday night is scary. We got to face this really good ace pitcher, Tariq Skubal. we had to face him in game 2. I was nervous about going to that game after going to game 1. And I have all the work that I do all day Sunday and Monday and Tuesday. I watch all the games individually, and then I write about every game all day Monday and Tuesday. That's kind of the busy thing for me with the newsletter. It's all very recap, fantasy focused, the signal and the noise from every game. And I, for the first time really I can remember, especially in a relatively early season week, I took significant time off on Sunday to go to this game. And I was like, it's going to be, I kind of wanted to back out of it. I had a buddy invited me to the game, and I kind of wanted to back out because I was like, man, if I go do all this on Sunday, put myself way behind the 8 ball for the content this week on Monday and Tuesday, and they lose both Saturday and Sunday, I mean, it's going to be miserable. But I'm going to do a thing that all of my sports fandom has taught me is the horrible thing to do, and put my emotional well-being into my Seattle Mariners and trust that they're going to go out and win this game in game 2. And I'll be elated, and it'll make it a lot easier for me to get through my content. And I went to that game in game 2, and I talked about it earlier. It was one of the best experiences at a sporting event that I've ever been at. I mean, it was an incredible game to watch. It was also evidence for what can happen in game 5. I mean, the Tigers are favored. If you go look at the betting market, they got the pitching advantage. Their bats came alive in game 4. I'd be lying to you if I told you the Mariners are just going to win and I'm not nervous about it. I'm nervous, but I do believe we can win a low-scoring game again, just the way that we did in game 2. I don't think it's impossible to score runs on this guy, as good as he is, and we do have an incredible pitching staff, and I do think we can hold them down enough. The thing I'm really dreading is that we give up some early runs, and then he just shuts us down, and then it's just a really tough game where you're behind the whole game, and you're hoping to get something going, and you never really do. Those are the really tough ones, obviously. I'm hoping our pitching staff comes out. Both of our starters from game 1 and 2 have enough rest. Hoping they come out and really hold the Tigers' bats down in the early part of the game, and we get to the middle part of the game, and his pitch count is up, 2 balls, and we're in a situation where, it's anyone's game at that point. So if we can keep it tight through the first 5-6 innings, that's where, anything can happen. I don't know what's going to happen at that point, but anything could happen. I can't give you a prediction. I'm way too close to it. Way too biased.
Okay.
Way too
I'm too close too. So I was hoping someone else would do it for me. No, man, I appreciate your passion for sports. I appreciate your passion for our Mariners, and I love everything you're doing. Appreciate you coming on here. Best of luck in the Stacked League. Before we close things out, is there anything else you want to share?
No. I mean, go Mariners. Go Mariners. That's the big thing right now.
That's
the only thing on my mind. My wife, my kids, and go Mariners.
There you go. Yeah, we moved this interview because of the game yesterday. So if that tells you anything. No, obviously, share it with the listeners, viewers, where they can find your work.
Yeah, the newsletter, bengretch.substack.com. Pretty straightforward. And then Stealing Bananas is the podcast. It's a name mashup of my work and Sean Siegel, who I talked about a little bit earlier on the show, the Zero RB guru. He and I have been doing a podcast together for about 5 years now. I think after I left CBS, he and I started that, give me a new podcasting outlet, and it's been a really, really fun project that I've done with him for a lot of years. And that is the primary place you can listen to me if you're more of a podcast person.
There you go. Well, hopefully I'll see you at the LCS, maybe the World Series. Hopefully at the SFB Live, I can count on that, I would imagine. And then hopefully in Canton at the Fantasy Football Expo. But until then, I'll wish you the best of luck moving forward. Take care, buddy.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.